Hello, it is Erica from the Teacher Next Door team. Hopefully, fingers crossed, live in the correct group right now. Hello, Erica from the Teacher Next Door team. Hopefully, live in the correct group right now. Okay, are we good? Checking with the team. We should be good now. All right. Welcome to the question and answer session of the Reading Center's training. If you are not enrolled in the Reading Center training course, you are more than welcome to join us and ask any questions that you have regarding running reading centers in your upper elementary classroom. Welcome to all of our trainees. Thank you so much for submitting all of these questions that I will answer for you tonight. I am going to get started right off the bat just because we're running a little bit behind right now, and I'm going to answer our very first question. You may have, if you were in the first live, you may have a little bit of a repeat right here, so I am going to repeat two of these questions right now. And remember, if you have any other questions or you can't make it for the full event, you can always watch the replay later, so feel free to join in on that. You can rewind me, whatever you need. If you need any links to anything, please make sure that you drop a comment and I will be able to answer any questions or send you any links after this live is complete. So any questions that you need, remember, drop it in the chat and I will get to them at the end. So first question is, can you give me a quick rundown of the small group resources that you are using? So if you are an enrollee in the Free Reading Centers training course, you know that we just dropped a bonus module talking about the entire Meet with Teacher Reading Center. That means that is our small group center where we are able to differentiate because we are working one-on-one or one-on-5 with our students in our classroom. So here we go. I am going to start from the very, very beginning. So how do I pick the students that I am actually working with? Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to take a quick snapshot of where I am, where each of my students are with the standard that we are working on that particular week. So when I do that, I give them a quick snapshot assessment. And remember, the things I'm going to be talking about in this particular Q&A are going to reference Teacher Next Door resources. You are welcome to emulate any of these processes with the resources that you have available to you in your classroom, or if you want to recreate any of this in your classroom, you are more than welcome to, but do know that you have access and availability of the Teacher Next Door resources to support learning in your own classroom as well. So I personally use the Reading Assessment Bundle to do this. I have all of my reading standards there for me. I have 3 assessments for each single standard. So I give the first assessment on Monday. I see where each of my students are with all of those skills. Then I take my digital, because I give this in Google Forms, I take my digital scores and I group my students in groups of usually 5, depending upon how many students I have. I tend to have a larger class size, so I've had my last class was 29 kids, so I'll do groups of 5, and then the students who scored the lowest on that assessment, I will see first, because those are my kids who are going to need that scaffolded instruction immediately off the bat. So say we go whole group, they still haven't really grasped that standard yet, they really need my support in a smaller group, I see those kids first. So in my Meet with Teacher Center, they will be the first group of kids that I see, and then when I am serving them in small group, I am using the digital reading bundle to support that learning. So the digital reading bundle also has the exact same set of standards, so all 20 units align exactly with the standards. So the assessment that I gave, I have an exact pair of activities that goes with that standard that I can use in small groups. So again, that's the digital reading bundle that I'm using. I am fortunate enough to have one-to-one devices in my classroom, so I am able to use their iPads, but I've also, if you're in the training, you know that I've had students who have had their iPads taken away. If you teach upper elementary, I'm sure you can relate. So when they have an iPad revoked for whatever reason it may be, I am able to hit file print and then print that activity for them as well. So I might have 4 kids on iPads and then 1 kid with the standard piece of paper. I personally prefer the paper. I know that the kids are like born with iPads in their hands and they're so good at manipulating them. I prefer that paper. So if you have a student who has some sort of accommodation where they need a paper-based activity, you can have that as well. So in those reading centers, I have that standards align activity that I am using. The beneficial part of that about that as well is that I have the standards align activity, and then for every passage, there's also a vocab activity and a comprehension activity. So in case I need to extend learning, because most of those kids I'm seeing off the bat are my like frequent flyer kids who I'm seeing pretty often who need that constant support in reading instruction. So I have those additional comprehension activities that I can support them with as well. But the big question is, how do I extend learning when I have to see the whole class? How do I extend learning to everybody in my class and still make sure that those kids who I saw off the bat are receiving feedback even when I'm not sitting in front of them? That's when I assign them the reading center skill portion, so I will show you. The Reading Center bundle is the one that has the 3 different formats. So we've got the Google Forms, the interactive PDF, and then the printable version. The one I'm going to show you right now, I have my iPad in front of me, is the interactive PDF version. So you can see it right here. It's got the directions on here. These are the ones that are tappable. So the student sees the question and then they can tap the answer here. I'm doing this backwards. So that says, sorry, try again. So my students are getting that instantaneous feedback, kind of like they're carrying me with them when they're working independently after I've worked with them. So really important to make sure that students are receiving feedback instantaneously rather than having to wait for me to grade a paper and then hand it back to them, because by then the learning that's already been done or the mistake that's been made has kind of come and gone. So having that instantaneous feedback from those Reading Center skill activities is so, so important. Again, that's the interactive PDF version. You can also have those exact same questions delivered in Google Forms. So instantaneous feedback for the kids and then also data collection for you. And then there is a printable version, which usually wind up being task cards or some sort of like game pieces where the kids can use tactile things and move them around and match them together. So that is the answer, the long-winded answer to the very first question regarding the small group resources. If you need any of those links, please drop a comment below and I will send any of them your way. Remember, you are welcome to emulate any of these things that we are talking about today in your own classroom with the resources that you have available to you as well. So the next thing here is what I'm going to open up the chat real quick just so I have quick access to what you guys are sharing. Okay, so I've got the next question, which says, how do I have access to the resources that I've purchased? I've purchased things on the Teacher Next Door site, but it's not TPT. I know how to re-download things on TPT, but I'm not sure how to on the Teacher Next Door site. So if you need to know how to access something on the Teacher Next Door site, you simply go to the site and up at the top, you can hit shop and then my account, and then you'll see a button that says my purchases. From there, anything that you have purchased, you will be able to download. So if you have a work computer and then a personal computer and you want to download them on both of those devices, you'll be able to access it through, again, shop, my account, and then my purchases. There's also a contact us button on there. If you have any questions regarding any of your purchases or just any questions in general, feel free to hit that contact us button and then shoot us a message and we will be happy to help you with anything that you need there. Next question we've got, can you share a real life video of reading centers? So in this case, this is a tricky question. We cannot share a real life video of reading centers because we do not have permission from our students' parents to share them all over the internet, rightfully so. So if you do have any questions about any of the components, though, we are happy to answer them for you. I know that I definitely benefit from seeing what my colleagues are doing in their classroom rather than just going to a PLC and listening to them talk about it. I much prefer to actually see it in person. So we will do our best to kind of paint a picture for you of what's going on. All right, the next question we have. How do you form groups when you have levels all over? I know that this incoming class, I have some very, very high students and then some students who are really struggling with even skills like decoding. I have been there too. If you have a class that is all over the board where your learning levels and your ability levels are so scattered, I find that Reading Centers actually benefits you in that way because you are able to work in small group and provide those kids who really need that support with decoding, with phonics, and provide them with that small group instruction. And then when you have kids who are really secure in those skills, like those decoding skills, and they're even secure in maybe their comprehension skills, you can enrich them because we are meeting with those groups too just a little bit later on in the week once you've provided that scaffolded instruction for the kids who really need it at the beginning of the week. I find that it's a lot easier to meet with all of my students rather than just meeting with one group of students. Before I used Reading Centers, I found that I was always missing, we called it GATE, but sometimes it's called GT, like your gifted kids and when they're in the gifted program, depending on what you called it, I was always missing out on seeing those kids in my small group. So when I designed my Reading Centers to be able to see everybody in my small group, I found that to be so much more beneficial because it was, one, it was less work for me. Two, I was seeing everybody and giving everybody what they needed regardless of where they were on the learning continuum in my classroom. All right, next question. I'm new to standards-based grading and I'm worried that kids will get lazy and not put in the effort because we're not grading them on things like participation and completion of work. I definitely understand this. I have moved from a traditional based grading school to a standards based grading school as well. It is, one, it's a big shift. I would say first order of business is cut yourself some slack because it's going to be a big change. When you assess standards your first year in the beginning of the year, and then you assess standards at the end of the year, again, give yourself a break here because you're going to do it differently as the year moves on because you also are learning how to grade in a new system. In regards to students kind of getting lazy here with putting in effort and things like that, I highly, highly, highly recommend from the very beginning of starting off reading centers that you really talk about that growth mindset. And really instilling in kids that it is so important for them to put in the effort in these reading centers, because then when you go to check in with them and see where they are at with a certain skill, that's when it's going to reflect. That's when the reflection is going to show whether or not they were truly putting in that effort and, you know, giving it their best shot and giving it their full attention, instead of those typical upper elementary things like chatting with a friend and like, when's recess? And it's like, we've been in school for 63 days. How do you not know when recess is? Kind of things like that. So in terms of making sure that your students are staying focused, definitely use that growth mindset. There are a ton of resources online, like even free resources about talking about growth mindset and how you can instill it in your kids, but definitely using that to drive your instruction and drive your routines from day one. And then again, after any break, after fall break, after winter break, and even in spring when things start to get kind of crazy. So we've got a question here from Bobby. She said, I have 8 students in a small rural school in Manitoba, California, Canada. I apologize, Bobby. First, one is in grade 2, one is in grade 3, grade 4, 5. Most are behind. How would you organize groups like this? Also, we need to use literacy place level books for guided reading instruction. You've got a lot on your plate there, Bobby. In terms of making sure that I can see all of those students, I would probably start out, Bobby, and you can kind of follow up with this in the chat. Are you enrolled in the Reading Centers training course? And if you are not, I'm kind of going to give you an overview of the guided reading model. So if you're starting out with those leveled books, I would definitely start your week with seeing your kids who need the most support. So your kids who are your lower readers, I would start seeing them on Monday. You may be seeing them more than once a week too, I would assume, if they are that low and really need that much support. So I would definitely start with those kids on Monday and then cycle through, I would say, almost half of your students per day. So if you could see half of them per day, that would likely be ideal, because then you might even be able to see some of them 3 times a week instead of just twice a week. So when you are starting out with those leveled readers, start with your lowest group first on Monday, and then get to the middle of your class by Tuesday. You'll be at the middle of your class and then working your way upward. When you are using those leveled readers, what I would do is I would look at those skills that you're working on in your leveled readers and then see if you can emulate, kind of like what we were talking about in the beginning of this live here, where you can extend whatever skill you're working on to have students work on that skill independently after that, but with some sort of component of instantaneous feedback. So if you don't have access to, say, like the reading centers that I just showed, one of my biggest tips, and I know this sounds silly, is to have whatever you're working on. Say you're working on task cards. If you have the students complete the task cards, I would then take the answer key and laminate it, put it up on my board, have students leave their pencils at their desk, and then leave like I leave like my Mr. Sketch like smelly markers up there so students can grade with them. And then they kind of like lose their mind because they're getting to use my markers. And they're like the smelly ones, so they love that. And then I have them assess themselves when they are going through their task cards. So if they're putting the answers on there, they self-correct. I know that like 10 years ago, it was a big thing to not have students self-correct their own work. But if this is a low stakes environment where we're really emphasizing practicing something and then learning from our mistakes, let them have the power to assess themselves in that low stakes environment where it's not like the teacher handing them back a piece of paper. It's actually them saying, oh shoot, I got number 3 wrong. I've got to go back to my task cards over there and I've got to go look at number 3, and then have them hold themselves accountable for that. So if they have graded it and they marked number 3 that they got it wrong, having them revisit those task cards and then assess themselves. Maybe they use a different colored pen or a different, even like their colored pencils in that case, having them then put the correct answer down, or having them just revisit and put like a smiley face that they revisited that task card and then just reviewed it. Even if it's just a minute, like 30 seconds to a minute of just reviewing it, having them hold themselves accountable in that sense is, 1, it's going to take a lot off of your plate. 2, it's a way that you're able to meet all of the needs in your classroom. In the training, we talk about having a low floor, high ceiling activity. So even if you're including reading activities in your centers where they are a low floor, meaning that it's an entry point for everybody, like everybody in your class could do some component of this particular activity. And then the high ceiling means that your kids who are able to, quote, level up, take that activity to the next level. Like a lot of these activities wind up being writing based activities. But if you have to make those accommodations in your class, if you have an activity where you have students who are really below grade level, giving them the opportunity to answer in some sort of other way. So if they're really struggling with writing, give them the opportunity to use something like Flipgrid, where they're recording a quick video, like a verbal answer to a question. Because if you're not assessing writing, like writing is important because most of those kids probably need support with writing. But if you're really assessing some sort of literary analysis skill or some sort of comprehension skill, if those kids are able to give you a verbal answer rather than a written answer, and that's going to be their entry point to that activity, and then later on you can work on those other skills so they can level it up, that would be something beneficial that you can do for them as well. Feel free to add more in the chat if you have any other questions about that. My next question that I have here is, I can already tell that I'm going to be struggling with classroom management this year. Any tips for running reading centers when I know I'm going to have to constantly be redirecting kids? Been there. Been there. Yes, number one suggestion would be to use proximity as your friend. So if you have students in your classroom who are going to constantly need redirection, I would definitely assign them a place to work on their reading centers, rather than, if you have that kind of flex seating in your classroom, I would not start the year with that. I would not give flexible seating a shot until much later in the year. If you already know that you're going to have a lot of redirecting to do, I would use assigned spots, be it tables. Now I don't like to keep kids in their actual seats, so in reading centers I like to change things up a little bit just so it feels a little bit different than an actual instructional time when we're sitting whole group or doing an independent activity. So I would definitely suggest using proximity. Move those kids who are going to need redirecting closest to you. Maybe you've got one there and one there, because sometimes you just got to give the look, you know, I'm working with these kids over here, here's a look. All right, now you're back on task, we're good. I would definitely use that first. Second thing I would do, or I would suggest, if you are using something like the accountability sheet, which I can show you right here. If you are using the accountability sheet, so there is a digital version on here for Google Slides, and then there is a paper-based version. If you have some sort of accountability sheet where students are checking off that they have completed a center, I have on mine a notes column right here. So on the side of this pencil, there's a notes column. If it takes it, I would have students genuinely rate their own focus. I would call it focus, not behavior. You can call it behavior if you have some sort of behavior intervention going on as you move throughout the school year. I would have them rate themselves. How focused were you today? Did you take that learning opportunity that you were given to actually practice the skill? Were you actually practicing it? Or did you need some sort of support? Did you need a reminder from me? And have the kids reflect on it. Don't do it yourself. Have the kids put their reflection on there. At the end of reading centers, if you need to write a little note on there, because that particular accountability sheet on this side, that goes home in my classroom on Friday. If you have to, at the end of reading centers, put a quick note, so-and-so needed to be redirected 3 times today. Do it. There's your documentation. I find that when the kids are rating themselves, then I don't have to do it. It just kind of gives them the reminder of, somebody at home is going to see this sheet, and even if somebody at home is not going to see the sheet, my teacher's going to see this sheet. So I'm going to need to make sure that I am staying focused, and sometimes it's just that little accountability for them that holds them accountable so that I have less managing to do. Next thing to do, besides proximity and then using accountability sheet, would be to have, if it gets to it, if you are redirecting so often, if I have my small group center right here, I have even moved a desk next to my small group center when I have had students who are on some sort of behavior intervention system. I have taught all over the board. I have taught students who are moving through some sort of RTI process, either academically or behavior-wise, where we've had to put in those severe interventions like that. So definitely proximity, accountability sheet, and then if you have to, just move somebody's desk right next to you, just so you can redirect if you need to. Next thing we've gotten here, reading. I use Reading Workshop. How do I keep parents in the loop? We do use Seesaw in our classroom. We are not a Google Classroom school, but when we've used Reading Workshop in the past, we have often found that we're not sending home much in regards to reading. They always get math papers sent home, but never reading. So what do I do? I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I too have had this exact same problem where if we're using things like readers' notebooks, those don't go home because those composition books stay in my room. And if you send them home, you know that it's likely that you're not going to get 3 or 4 of them back for a while. So if you are able to use Seesaw, what I would do, I'm assuming that you likely have some sort of tablet, iPad, Android, something in your class where you can take a picture of work. What I have done, I've used Seesaw in the past as well. What I have done is I've had students take a photo of their actual reader's notebook. So this is a blank page right here. So if they had some sort of work on here, they've taken their iPads and they've taken a photo of it. I've sent them an assignment in Seesaw, but it was blank. Like, no, it didn't say anything. It was just the assignment with the title on it. And then the student added the photo of their actual work. And then I was able to leave feedback and then send it home that way. And that way my composition book stayed in my classroom, and no one was able to take them home with them because I knew that they weren't going to come back. And then parents were also in the loop of seeing what their child was doing in my classroom that day, because Reading Workshop and even guided reading can be really, really difficult to be able to send work home when most of that learning is happening in the classroom. And if you only have conferences once or twice a year, it's really difficult to communicate face-to-face with parents and a large spectrum of how their child is doing when they're not receiving work home every single week. So very easy way to kind of add in sending work home without actually sending it home. All right, I've got a small classroom. Students are struggling with organization due to, I think it's because of missing so much school due to COVID. We don't have devices, but I do have 5 iPads available in my classroom. What do I do? I can definitely see why students would be struggling with those executive functioning skills, given the fact that they kind of missed out. Our incoming 4th graders now, they missed like 1st and 2nd grade mostly. So those executive functioning skills that really build themselves in the primary grades are really missing. Some kids, you can tell that they've definitely had a lot of support at home, and then some kids really didn't have that support at home. So I find that these inequities that happened when we were virtual learning are really reflecting themselves in the classroom right now. I'm not sure, do you guys see that in your classroom? If you are in the live, go ahead and type yes or no. Do you see students struggling with like organizational tasks and time management tasks? Is that something that's you're seeing in your classroom as well? If that is the case, I highly recommend definitely leaning into some sort of accountability sheet and having students pause and reflect, even if 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, having them pause and reflect, go to their accountability sheet and make sure, okay, I'm checking off, I did that task. And I know that it might sound like that's made for the primary grades, but even in those upper elementary grades, having students take that time to go into the accountability sheet, check off, yes, I did that task, what am I doing next? Even if they have to physically draw an arrow to like what they're doing next, I find that definitely helps. That's an accommodation that I've used in my classroom for some of my students who just struggle with those executive functioning skills, be it if they have like a 504 or even an IEP, or they're going through some sort of intervention process, definitely making sure to have something tactile. If you're in the course, you know that I use magnets on my whiteboard. So each of my students has a round magnet and my students have numbers. They move their numbered magnet to the activity that they're on. So if I have 5 reading centers, I list them all just in dry erase marker because I changed them. So I'll list them in dry erase marker, and then I have when they're finished with one center, I have my students physically grab their magnet and then move it to a new center. And you would think that would cause like mass chaos at my whiteboard, but it really doesn't, because my centers are not timed. I have students move through them at their own pace, because like if I were cleaning my bedroom and then someone barged into my bedroom and said, stop, we're transition, go clean the kitchen, time to go clean the kitchen, you have 1 minute to finish, go clean the kitchen, I would probably lose my mind and be like, I'm in the middle of something, I'm so focused, I'm in the zone, I don't want to stop right now. So I don't use timers in my reading centers. I let kids move through them at their own pace. I check in with them, like if they're not moving quick enough, I definitely will give them put a little pep in their step. but I have them physically go up to my whiteboard, grab their magnet, and then move it to their new area. And I find that even just walking away from their work, moving their magnet, and then like focusing on, okay, I'm moving this to, my Reader's Notebook Center or my tech center. So I'm going back to my desk and I'm working on tech. So those students who kind of get sidetracked and they're like, what was I doing now? They already know because they went and moved their magnet up on the whiteboard. So definitely a suggestion for that. What is the course called again? So the course is called, it's just the Free Reading Center training course from the Teacher Next Door. It is closed for enrollment right now, but it will be opening again before the end of the year. So if you're not on the Teacher Next Door's email list, I will post a link where you can get on the wait list so you can be the first to know about the Reading Center's training course when it opens again. We've had a couple thousand people go through it this time, and then like I said again, we will have doors open again, so hopefully we can invite even more teachers into the Free Reading Center's training course. I have a grade 3 boy with ADHD and he's on medication. It takes him forever to do the simplest task and constantly seeing what others are doing instead of the task at hand. Any tips? Yes. So like I just mentioned, having him physically move his magnet up on the board. Sometimes I have had students who, even when they've moved their magnet up on the board, also need to carry something with them. So I have had students who need these accommodations. So even if I have my whiteboard up there where I have all of my centers listed and they have the magnet where they move it, I've taken a picture of my actual whiteboard, like I've removed all the magnets from it, and I took a picture of my whiteboard and I printed it on paper for that student. And even when they moved their magnet up there, they had they would cross it off on their actual paper. So if they wrote down that they worked with the teacher already, they would X it off on their sheet and it would look exactly like it does on my whiteboard. That was the key, is that the student knew that's what it looks like up there. That's where I'm supposed to be at. Okay, I'm carrying this with me. This looks exactly like it does up there. Okay, where am I at now? Right here. I've even done that on like a quarter sheet of paper, just super small, and then put it on a key ring. Honestly, I put it on a key ring for a student and then use a dry erase marker so they were able to just kind of wear it on like one of those stretchy, you can put like your keys on it, like the stretchy bands on like a key ring, and then carry it with them. I've also had students on the back side. We've had like our schedule. So if it were Monday, they knew they had a really hard time transitioning this student. So if we were going to art, like I had to tell them we are going to art in 5 minutes so they could be ready to transition out of my classroom and into art. So they were able to carry that schedule with them, just laminated. Again, I honestly didn't use Expo marker. I used the vis-a-vis markers because they couldn't be erased. Like the student couldn't erase them because that was a problem sometimes. So I used the vis-a-vis markers because I had to wipe them off with actual like water or like a wipe. So vis-a-vis marker, laminated schedule, match it to whatever schedule you've got in your room or whatever like management device that you're using in your room, and then having them take that with them is my suggestion. All right, next question. We've got, I'm still short on time. We're even talking about going 4 days a week because of lack of staff. How am I going to fit all of this in? If you are super, super short on time, I know when we polled our audience, some teachers only had 60 minutes to teach all of ELA. Writing, grammar, spelling, reading. That is an extremely short block. My heart goes out to you because that's incredibly difficult to do. If you still want to run reading centers and you have a super short block, highly recommend, do not start with 5 centers, start with 3 centers. 3 centers and that's it. Do not have them timed. Have students, and even if you're starting with 3 centers and you have that short of a block, start with those 3 centers and then have students finish those centers by Friday. So don't do 3 centers every day. Have them just work on 3 activities throughout the week. And then if you have fast finishers who need some sort of support, you can do some sort of enrichment activities or like when you're done activities for them, but just have 3 activities. I would highly suggest have them be self-grading, have them be systematic so you know you're pulling from the same thing each and every single week. So if you have that digital reading bundle, you know that's where you're going today to pull this activity. You're pulling it from the digital reading bundle. Don't do that thing where you're looking all over the internet. You're working on main idea this week. Okay, I'm on the internet, I'm on TPT, I'm looking for freebies. I've got to find main idea. And then the next week, now you're on informational text structures, and now you're looking for informational text structures. Speaking from experience, I have been there. It is so difficult and it is so time consuming to be reinventing the wheel every single week. So what I highly recommend is that you choose something. If you have something available in your class, like leveled readers, like some sort of even if it's like your workbook activities or something like that. Whatever you have available to you that can be systematic, choose that, because then you know what you're going to every week. So for example, like I said, I pull from my digital reading bundles. For my reading centers, I know that I have access to all of these. This is my main idea one right now. I have access to all 20 skills and the exact same format. So if I'm using Google Forms, I have 20 different sets of Google Forms for all of my skills from beginning of the school year to the end of the school year. Or if I'm using interactive PDFs, I've got all 20 skills, and I can mix those up because like after a while, students are going to get tired of doing Google Forms. So maybe you switch from Google Forms to doing the interactive PDFs, or maybe someday you switch from the interactive PDFs to doing the hands-on version, like the paper version, where they're using task cards or putting puzzle pieces together or something like that. But choose something that's going to make your life easier. Also, look for resources that are self-grading. Reading centers shouldn't be something that you're adding to your grading pile. Reading centers are meant to have your students build that knowledge of that skill, so then when you assess them in some sort of summative assessment, then they can show the reflection of that learning. Reading centers should not be adding to your grading pile. That is too much work. We do not have enough hours in the day, and we don't get paid enough to be grading stacks of papers that are this high once a week. So make sure that whatever you're using, you're able to grade it or give instant feedback. I shouldn't say grade it. Assess it in some sort of way, digitally even, where kids are getting instantaneous feedback. It's formative. The kids are just practicing. If they're making mistakes, that's okay, because that's when learning is happening. And you are able to build routine and pull from resources where you have enough to meet your needs from day one to the last day of school. So I wanted to remind you guys, if you are in the free Reading Centers training course, you already know this, but the reading centers that I just showed, my main idea ones with the interactive PDFs, the Google Forms, and the paper version, you get all three formats of those, and this is available for grades 3, 4, and 5. If you would like to grab those, you can grab them from the Teacher Next Door shop. You can use code ROUTINE25. Again, that's ROUTINE25 at checkout for 25% off that entire reading bundle. It'll take you from the beginning of the school year all the way through the end of the school year, ROUTINE25 through August 31st. So you've got all the way through next week to grab those if you would like to. Anything additional that you grab from the Teacher Next Door shop, be it the Reading Standards bundle where you're assessing students and seeing where they are, they're quick snapshots. We are not in the business of making kids sit in front of a computer or a piece of paper for over 40 minutes, assessing them, giving them super long assessments. These are quick snapshots of where students are. Those you can also get 10% off of those with Training 10% off of anything else in your cart, whatever you could dream of. So Training 10 for 10% off of all of the resources in the Teacher Next Door shop. I think we're up to 526 resources now, so like anything you can dream of is in there. And then again, the specific reading centers are 25% off with code ROUTINE25 through August 31st. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to drop them in the comments, send us an email through the contact form on the website, send us a message here. You are welcome to tag me in the Upper Elementary Neighborhood Reading Center group here on Facebook. Whatever you need, I am happy to answer it for you. I will drop a couple of those links that were mentioned in this Reading Centers Q&A in the chat. Just want to do a quick overview, making sure that I answered any and all questions here. I have accountability sheet. We've got this. If anybody wants this who did not grab it, if anybody wants the paper version of the accountability sheet and the digital version, if you want that, tag me in the chat below. I will send this to you. This was a freebie in the free Reading Center training, but if you do want that, shoot me a message in the comments here and then ask me for the accountability sheet, and I am happy to send it your way. So thank you so much for joining us for this live. If you're watching the replay, hello. If you're in the training, it is I, live and in person. Anything that you need, I am here for you. So hopefully you guys have a great Friday tomorrow and enjoy your weekend. If you started school this week, take a nap, and then we will chat with you soon.